Hi, and welcome to the TA Leader Series, where I have the privilege of talking to people who are leading the way in talent acquisition, who are doing interesting things, thinking about interesting things, and have observation and perspective that helps us all. Today, I'm thrilled to have David as my guest. David, would you introduce yourself for the audience, please?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. My name is Dave Weinstock. I am a current VP at TA at a company called News Story. We are a leader in alternative and special education.
Great. And you've been thinking about the whole AI space for a long time, and you have an interesting take on it that AI is really changing the decision process and the purchasing cycles of products because it's changing so fast. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so look, I'm in my personal life, my wife will verify this. I'm pretty frugal. And so when I used to make purchasing decisions on behalf of companies, as well as my personal life, it was, well, if I'm going to use this for 12, 24 months, let's just go ahead and buy it at once, upfront cost. They say buy once, cry once. And so I was really a believer of that because oftentimes you would get a discount, right? If you're subscribe and save for all my Chewy members out there. And so, historically speaking, I would just go for that annual. I felt I had high conviction. And at the time, pre AI, how much more can a tool develop in 12 months? And so now, today, with the rapid development of features and changes and this, that, and the other, I'm finding myself wondering if that discount is truly worth the lock-in period, right? So say I get 20% discount, but then I'm stuck with that tool for 12 months, and then another provider comes on that has a much better product or features because of AI's advancements and development and et cetera. And so I'm not saying let's just have change management for the sake of change management. It's more so is the 20% discount worth being locked in for 12 to 24 months. And so it's had me really start to think about, is that discount worth being locked in for?
But here's another piece to it. This probably is most applicable if you're buying software that you personally are going to use. If you're going to try to implement it enterprise wide, you've got such a long adoption rate and such an investment there. Does that is, and we're seeing vendors wanting to go to 3 to 5 year contracts. Never mind a 1 year. They want several years. And but some of that, in fairness, is the investment that's made in the adoption and the training process. How does it vary based on how many people are going to use it?
Absolutely. I think it's not just how many people are going to use it. I think it's the tool itself, right? So if I think on a spectrum, on one end, you have an HRIS, which is going to be a multi-year cycle from discovery, RFP, change management, implementation, adoption. But then on the other side of that spectrum, right, you have frictionless tools. So a sourcing agent. So for example, if I'm looking at a juice box or a pin, right? Yes, they have both have annual contracts. At the end of the day, it's pretty much the core functionality. They're going to go retrieve data from the same data brokers, right? And they're probably going to have some varying degrees of separation around their features and functionalities. At the end of the day, for me to make that change within my team, to your point around headcount, the structure is still there, right? The process, the workflow is still there. It's just the tool has changed. So you do make a good point to not think of this as just, hey, let's go look at my entire budget and say we're going to change all of these line items throughout the year. You do have to do it with a fine-tooth comb, but a lot of the tools we're using, AI interviewers, those are sold as quick starts. We can get you up in a couple of weeks. What I think we're also missing when we're selling those solutions, right, as a vendor or a partner, as I like to say, that's also less friction on the back end. So you're selling ease of implementation. You also have to be mindful if a vendor or as a practitioner, ease of friction on the back end to change. And so to your point, it's all a spectrum, and you as a practitioner have to evaluate the pros and cons. Like you can't have change management for the sake of change management. So if you have high conviction that a sourcing tool is going to get you better results at a cheaper rate with kind of the overarching same workflow or same process, then yeah, that probably makes a little bit more sense than trying to say I need a new ATS. Because if you're trying to implement a new ATS, even at every 3 years, I may question your ability to purchase an ATS. Like there are certain tools that should have staying power. but there are a category of tools that have are frictionless and easier to change out.
And right now we're clearly at the early days of AI. The large language models, are changing themselves. So there's a tool that might work really well this month, and not work next month. I mean, we saw this in a different level. There are all these tools that were going to scrape LinkedIn or, going to boost your posts on LinkedIn. And then LinkedIn made a change and all of a sudden they weren't valuable anymore. So we are in a time of so much change that the very premise, the business situation you were in when you bought the tool could change. So it's hard to do that, but I think it's hard for purchasers to really evaluate these tools because as you mentioned earlier, kind of just the product development goes so much quicker. What they sell you today, they may evolve it and you may be on version 4 by, Thanksgiving, because they've been able to
Yeah.
upgrade the tool or adjust, or you might have a tool that's completely worthless by Thanksgiving.
You
How
make
do
a
you try
yeah,
to evaluate that?
you make a great point, right? So we're talking about the positive side of product development. What we're also seeing is buyers' minds being transformed. No longer are we going to be patient for the roadmap, right? You have an Ashby. Last I checked, I think they did 45 or 47 product feature updates in the last 90 days. So that's a product feature every 2 days on average. So when older companies who've been around, those companies that we all know of, they have a community where you go vote on solutions and maybe they work on it, or maybe you go into the graveyard and they haven't worked on it in 5 years. I will not name names today. And so that used to work back in the day. Today, you have people in companies building their own recruiting products, right? There are
Yeah.
now talent engineers who are writing code to develop their own. So the expectations of practitioners is going to increase. Like we know how quickly these things can be ramped up, and we're seeing the products and being inundated with tools to solve all of our problems. So yeah, it's the change fatigue is real. I think you have to stay nimble, and then you have to separate, like, does that work for us? And that's a mistake that I have made. And I have to say, and I have to be humble about that. You don't, when you're buying a tool for an organization, the tool has to fit the organization, right? We as recruiting leaders, we may say, I know that's awesome, but that may just be awesome for company B and it doesn't fit your organization. So I think you have to have some friction around your buying process. And again, it's a spectrum. You don't want to say, oh, we're only going to do one RFP per year, but you also want to have a bit more rigor to make sure what you're buying actually is helping solve your problem. So I know it's a bit of a whirlwind, but it is it's an example of how complex buying is these days.
And to your point, I think it's also easy for TA leaders, particularly ones that are buying new tools and looking ahead and really plugged in. And I find good TA leaders are really open to change and they're flexible and they adapt really quickly. That doesn't mean their organization is going to adapt. And, when you talk about Ashby and doing a new feature every 2 days, I will tell you there's some software I use. Every once in a while I go, where is that damn button? Like
Yeah.
I know how to do this task on this piece of software. Where'd they move it? And I don't want to open a piece of software every day and have to relearn my screens. And I'm pretty agile. I run a tech company. But organizations, again, some of them, you've got people who are really quick on the uptake and they just want new tools. They eat it up. They get invigorated by it. Other people just get frustrated and pull their hair out because they want to be able to go in, get done what they need to do. And, if they figured out a workaround, they figured out a workaround and it works for them and on they go. So as a buyer, it's got to be hard to not just buy what appeals to you, but what your team can use productively. And that's a whole different level that I'm not sure I've ever seen asked in an RFP.
Yeah, you're right. It's hard. TA folks, like we want the best. We are very passionate individuals, for lack of a better adjective. Like, and it can, but at the end of the day, it's like you've got to see like you're representing a company. It's not what's best for me in this example. It's what's best for the organization. And so to your point, like, yeah, you can, or we do a lot of looking left and right. Oh, well, that company's doing this or that company's doing that, or you go to a conference and you see all
Yeah.
these fun use cases. My feedback would be you have to look at yourself as a leader and figure out what kind of company you want to work for, right? So if you are an early adopter, tech forward, whatever language you want to use, then you probably should align your philosophy as a practitioner with the company you're supporting versus your late to change, you probably don't want to join like a cutting edge tech company or the inverse. So I think we also, as leaders and practitioners, also have our own homework to do to make sure that our philosophy, how our minds work, and how we're wired actually aligns with the organization that we're supporting.
Yep, absolutely. And I could talk to you all afternoon about this, but I want to keep it short so we have lots of people who have time to watch all of this. David, if people are interested in continuing this conversation with you or have questions and want to do it, are you open to them reaching out to you on LinkedIn and
Yeah,
reaching out and
absolutely. I'm on LinkedIn probably more time than I care to admit outside of work hours. So David Weinstock, that's Wein for our US based folks. And absolutely learn from my mistakes. Happy to talk shop and happy to learn from others.
great, wonderful. Thank you, David. Thanks for joining
Thank
us
you.
today.
Appreciate it.
Bye. Bye.